The message reached Earth on a quiet night. It came first as a whisper through deep space relays, then as a storm of broken calls for help. Screens at the lunar command hub filled with static and distress tags. A peaceful world in the Telnari Confederation was under attack. The Telnari had been kind to human traders. They opened their ports, shared maps through the dust lanes, and taught young human pilots how to skim gravity safely. Now their cities burned, and their small patrol craft fell in lines of fire. Captain Laura Bennett stood at the main window of the hub and watched the blue crescent of Earth rise over the crater rim. She loved this view. It reminded her what she served. But tonight the view did not calm her. Beside her, the room hummed with low voices and the steady pulse of data. She kept her hands folded to keep them steady. A tech clicked through one channel after another and shook his head. Another officer tried to rebuild a signal from a damaged beacon. All they had from the Telnari was a short clip of sound and a few seconds of blurred light. A city street. People running. The sky turning white. Commander Daniel Price came up the steps with a quick stride. He was younger than most commanders in the hub, but he did not act unsure. He had the same steady, focused look he wore during training flights around Mars. He stopped by Laura and did not ask if she had seen the reports. He could read the room as well as she could. He looked at the screen, at the red markers that showed where the Telnari ships had vanished. Then he breathed in and spoke low and even. "We have to get ready," he said. "We cannot let this pass." Laura did not look at him. She kept her eyes on the weak signal feed and tried to pull more detail with a finger slide. The feed did not give much. She knew Daniel was right. She also knew the cost behind his words. If Earth moved now, the choice would change the next century, maybe more. She answered in the same steady tone he used. "We will prepare," she said. "We will do it by the book, but we do not rush." A new window opened on the main screen. It carried the mark of a Telnari emergency channel. The sound was rough and thin, like wind through a broken door. A voice spoke in a language the hub could translate only half the time. The auto captions lagged, skipped, and caught again. Shields failed. South Ridge. Children to the river shelters. Please, to any ally. They are not taking prisoners. Silence followed. The channel dropped. The text tried to get it back and failed. Laura finally turned from the window. She walked to her chair and sat. Her chair did not face the window, but the people. She wanted them to see that she was present and engaged. She wanted them to hear calm words. "Put me through to fleet duty," she said. "Priority line." The connection rolled across the room. Earth's emblem lit the side wall. Distant voices confirmed lines, keys, and secure modes. A soft tone sounded, then a clear voice answered. It was Admiral Hayes from Earthside Fleet Command. He spoke with a careful pace as if he had already been on calls like this for hours. "Laura," he said, "we see it too. Give me your reading." She kept her words simple and precise. "Telnari defense net looks broken. Multiple points of loss within an hour. Patterns of fire match Valari weapons." The name hung in the room like a cold draft. The Valari were not new to anyone here. They were a hard-scaled people with a talent for siege, and a doctrine that treated mercy as weakness. Their border kept inching forward like frost. They did not sign long peace. They signed short ones that let their shipyards breathe, then they came again. "We will confirm," the Admiral said. "Prepare the hub for coordination. No deployments until we call." Laura knew that rhythm. Confirm, coordinate, delay. She also knew that the Admiral had to talk to leaders across Earth, to chairs of committees, to governors of outer colonies, to people who would count the cost in votes and years. She said, "Understood," and ended the call. She did not let herself sigh. The room did not need to hear it. Daniel stayed by her chair. "You know what they will do," he said. "They will wait until it is clean and certain and safe to move. By then the Telnari will be ash." "We do not move without orders," Laura said. "But we do not sit idle either. Start readiness checks for the Horizon's Wrath and the Iron Valor. Quiet status only, no external chatter." Daniel nodded and left the dais. His voice carried across the pit as he spoke to shipside liaisons. Names rolled through the air like notes in a song. Hull pressure tests, fusion balance, rail feed temps. He spoke fast but not frantic. People moved to his pace. The hub woke from shock and lined up with action. On the far side of the room, Maya Brooks, a sensor analyst with sharp eyes and a soft voice, raised a hand. "Captain," she said, "I think I have a partial visual from a patrol craft near the Telnari world." "Put it up," Laura said. The screen filled with a shaky view from a cockpit cam. Stars swung as the small ship tried to run. A dark shape crossed the frame. It was wide and low, like a blade laid flat. It carried the repeating edge pattern that human archives tagged as Valeri hull trim. The cam shook again, and a bright sheet of light blew through the corner of the view. The feed frosted, cleared, and died. "That is enough," Daniel said from the floor. "That is a flag. That is proof." Laura let the room breathe for a few seconds. "We document it and send it up," she said. "We keep building readiness." She rose from her chair and walked the room. She checked the small details. She touched the backs of chairs as a sign that she was there. She asked simple questions, because simple questions kept people grounded. "Do we have the latest star charts for the approach lanes? Are the jump plots fresh? Did we account for the Telnari beacon drift?" She paused by Nora Patel, who handled logistics. Nora had a neat screen and a neat mind. She was already building a freight list for medical modules and recovery drones. "If we move," Nora said, "we can load aid pallets on the same carriers that bring in torpedo cores. It will not slow launch time. It will help if we find survivors." "Do it," Laura said. Hours slid by. On Earth, sunlight moved from the Pacific coast to the plains, then over the mountains and out to the Atlantic. Inside the hub there was no sun, only clocks and fatigue. Not all work was loud. Some of it was the quiet test of patience. A heartbeat beat of waiting mixed with the steady motions of preparation. In a brief, still moment, Laura looked again at Earth through the window. She remembered her first training flight. She had been a cadet with wide eyes and a heart that wanted the stars for their beauty. The instructor had said a thing she never forgot. "You serve people, not space," he said. "Do not fall in love with the dark and forget the faces." She held that in her mind now. Faces. Telnari faces in a street with the sky turning white. A chime cut the air. Daniel was back at her side, tablet in hand. "We have a new line from the outer yard," he said. "The Tempest-class ships can be ready if we call it. I know it is not our call, but if we send the word now, we save hours. We can always stand them down if the order comes to hold." Laura looked at him. His eyes did not show fear. They showed care and strain, the look of someone who thinks about the people he cannot see. She weighed risk and need. She measured it the way she would measure a jump path, one vector at a time. "Do it," she said. "Quiet channel. Need to know crew only." Daniel moved again. The hub felt like a ship now. It had a shared breath and a single direction. On a side feed, an inner yard display showed shadowed shapes under scaffolds. The Tempest hulls slept like mountains. Techs in small suits drifted along their sides and checked seals. Tugs shifted reactor casks into place with tiny puffs of gas. If ships could dream, these ones dreamed of storm and thunder. Maya called out again. "Captain, I have a civilian link from New Seattle. It is flagged and repeats. It claims to be from a human trader on the Telnari world." "Open it," Laura said. A face appeared. It was a man in his 50s, unshaven, tired, with a set of work lights behind him. He spoke in a whisper. "My name is Clint Warren," he said. "I run a fuel skiff. I was at the river port when the first shots hit. The Telnari tried to guide people to the shelters under the hills, but the shooting came too fast. There are still people on the north bank. They are hiding in the ruins and in the old ferry tunnels. I can hear the search teams droning about. They are rounding up anyone they find. Some people slipped across the water and made it into the grain silos. I left my skiff under a breakwater. I have a short window link through an old relay. If anyone hears this, please know there are survivors." He looked down and wiped his face. "I am not a soldier," he said. "I know you cannot tell me what to do. But if you come, there are people to save. If you do not come, the river will be full of bodies by dawn." The link cut. Maya tried to hold it and could not. The room went very quiet. A few people glanced at Laura and then back at their screens. No one spoke the thought that hung in the air. The thought did not need to be said. Laura keyed a direct line to the Admiral again. The wait lasted 10 long seconds. When his face came up, she did not waste words. "Admiral," she said, "we have visual evidence of Valari ships at the Telnari world. We have a civilian account of survivors under active threat. Tempest hulls are ready to wake. Request release for fleet deployment to defend civilians and reclaim the system." He did not reply at once. She could see other windows reflected in his eyes. He was talking to other leaders while he spoke to her. He was a man pulled in many directions. "We are close," he said. "I need one more." Engines rumbled like a storm inside the hidden yards of Titan. The great Tempest-class warships woke from their long sleep. Towers of scaffolds peeled away, and the curved hulls glowed with fresh power. Lights blinked in sequence across their spines, and shields spread over their frames like ripples on water. Crews moved with fast steps, their faces set with purpose. They did not speak of fear or pride. They spoke of checklists, switches, and seals. They knew what was at stake, and that was enough. Captain Laura Bennett stood on the command deck of the Horizon's Wrath. The ship felt alive under her boots. She listened to the low thrum of the core as it stabilized. She looked at the rows of stations where officers checked screens and reported their statuses. Every voice added a piece to the larger whole. She carried herself with calm, because her crew needed calm more than fire. Commander Daniel Price walked the deck beside her, speaking to each group and giving short, firm words. His presence steadied them. Together they created an air of control in the middle of coming war. Orders moved down the line. Supply craft docked and unloaded torpedoes, medical pallets, and aid crates marked with Earth symbol. Engineers slid reactor rods into place. Weapons teams polished rails, calibrated coils, and checked heat vents. In the lower hangars, pilots strapped into small strike craft, their helmets resting on their knees as they waited for the signal. They were young, some barely out of academy, but their eyes were sharp. They knew they were about to write a story the galaxy would remember. On the bridge, Laura kept her words simple. "We launch with control," she said. "We aim with care. We guard civilians first. We guard each other always." Her words went out over the ship's net. Thousands heard them. None cheered. They only nodded, tightened straps, or tapped the photos taped to their screens. They carried the meaning inside. At the same time, the Iron Valor prepared under Daniel's direct eye. The Valor had a heavier frame made for close battle. Daniel checked the gunnery decks himself. He looked each section chief in the eye and reminded them, "Clean shots. No waste, no fear." They returned his words with quiet affirmations. He felt pride rise in his chest, not for glory, but for the readiness of people who would fight beside him. When both warships reported green, the fleet gathered in formation. Smaller escort craft lined the flanks, cargo ships carrying aid locked into position behind them. The fleet looked like a spear tip followed by a hand ready to heal. At the center, the Horizon's Wrath pulsed with power, its massive rail cannons gleaming in the docklight. The moment had come. Admiral Hayes gave the final command across the net. "Fleet, you are cleared. Defend our allies. Show the Valari what it means to strike at friends of Earth." The jump gates flared. Stars stretched and twisted, then snapped back. The human fleet vanished from Titan's orbit and reappeared at the edge of the Telnari system. Silence filled the ships for a breath. Then alarms began to sound. Enemy contacts filled the screens. The Valari were waiting. Their ships hung over the captured Telnari world in thick lines. They formed rings of steel around the planet, their hulls dark and jagged like blades. From orbit, fires glowed on the surface. Cities still burned. Trails of smoke reached into space like desperate hands. The Valari fleet turned as one toward the human ships. They believed Earth had sent the same weak cruisers the galaxy remembered from decades past. They thought they would break them in a single charge. On the bridge of the Horizon's Wrath, Laura gave her first order. "Shields full. Formation Delta. Escorts guard the relief carriers. Gunnery crews stand by." The Iron Valor shifted into the lead position. Daniel's voice carried through the net. "We hold line. Wait for my mark." The Valari opened fire first. Bright streams of plasma cut through space. The beams lit the dark like rivers of fire. The human ships held formation. The shields of the Horizon's Wrath absorbed the first barrage, the glow spreading across the hull in waves. Then Laura gave the quiet order that changed the battle. "Fire." The rail cannons of the Tempest class spoke. Metal slugs shot out at near light speed. They crossed the void before the Valari could adjust. The first enemy cruiser split in half, its armor shredded like paper. Shock rippled through the Valari ranks. More shots followed. The Iron Valor's cannons roared, tearing through 2 destroyers in a single volley. The escorts added steady streams of fire. The dark sky turned into a storm of light and thunder. Valari ships tried to regroup. They turned their heavy carriers forward, hoping to shield their weaker craft. Daniel saw it and gave his order. "Push through. Break them." The Valor surged ahead, its hull trembling with power. It smashed into the line, firing point blank. Plasma washed over its shields, but the warship did not falter. Its rails and lances cut deep. Around it, enemy ships burst into debris fields, scattering metal and fire across the void. Laura maneuvered the Horizon's Wrath into flanking position, catching Valerie craft from the side and tearing holes through their wings. The Valari had thought humans weak. Now they realized they had awakened a storm. On the surface of the Telnari world, survivors hiding in tunnels looked up as the sky shook. They saw streaks of fire above the clouds. They heard distant booms that rolled through the earth. To them, it felt like the end of everything. But then they saw enemy ships burning, falling like meteors, and they whispered in awe. The humans came. Back in orbit, the Valari scrambled to send reinforcements from their outer lines. But the human fleet pressed forward with ruthless control. Escort craft darted between enemy wings, drawing fire and striking at weak points. Medical carriers held back but prepared for rapid descent. Inside one, Nora Patel stood by her load of supplies. She watched the battle through a small screen. Her hands trembled, but her voice stayed calm as she checked the crates again and again. She whispered to herself, "Hold the line. Just hold." The Horizon's Wrath locked onto a Valari battleship, one of their largest. Laura gave the command. The main cannons fired together. The impact tore open the enemy's central hull. For a moment, the battleship hung broken. Then it exploded in a storm of shards and flame. The blast lit the bridge of the Wrath like a sunrise. The crew did not cheer. They only kept working, eyes forward, voices steady. Daniel pushed the Iron Valor deeper into the enemy ranks. The ship shook as plasma blasts rained against its shields. Warning lights flickered. He gripped the railing and spoke clearly. "We do not stop. We cut the core." Focus fire, his crew obeyed. Shots ripped through the Valari command cruiser. Sparks burst across the enemy decks. A massive rupture spread along its spine, and the command link went silent. With their lead ship gone, the Valari formation wavered. Laura seized the moment. All ships advance. Break their hold on orbit. The human fleet surged forward. One by one, Valari ships shattered under precise fire. The space above the Telnari world turned into wreckage and flame. The survivors below saw the sky clear, the enemy falling, and they cried with relief. They knew the tide had turned. Hours passed, and the battle thinned. The Valari broke formation and tried to flee. Some made jumps to distant points, their drives flaring bright. Others were caught in nets of fire and torn apart. In the end, wreckage drifted in silent fields. Human ships stood scarred but strong. The Horizon's Wrath and the Iron Valor loomed like giants among shadows. When the last enemy signal faded, Laura gave her final order for the day. Secure orbit. Escorts sweep the debris. Relief carriers begin descent to marked shelters. On the planet, the survivors saw human shuttles break through the smoke-filled skies. They saw aid crates drop with parachutes. They saw men and women in simple uniforms rushing to guide them out of tunnels, silos, and ruins. For the first time in days, they felt hope. Daniel stood on the Valor's bridge and looked at the drifting wrecks. He knew this was only the start. The Valari would not forget. They would come again. But for now, they had been broken. For now, Earth had spoken with fire and steel. Laura stayed at her post, eyes on the stars. She thought of the people saved, the ones still lost, and the weight of what had begun. Her voice was low when she spoke to herself, words only the bridge recorder caught. They destroyed our allies. Now they will remember who we are. The smoke over the Telnari world still rose, but the sky was different now. Instead of Valari ships circling above like hawks, the stars showed human warships holding steady lines. The Horizon's Wrath and the Iron Valor anchored the fleet. Their dark hulls gleamed with scars, but their shields glowed with power. Below, survivors crawled out of tunnels, ruins, and grain silos. They looked up at the giant ships, whispering that Earth had come to save them. On the bridge of the Horizon's Wrath, Captain Laura Bennett leaned forward in her chair. Reports streamed across her screen. Rescued civilians, secured shelters, enemy wrecks drifting in orbit. She should have felt relief, but her mind stayed sharp. She knew battles never truly ended when the guns went silent. The Valari were predators. They would not give up after one defeat. They would pull back, regroup, and strike again. She had to prepare. Commander Daniel Price stood on the Iron Valor's deck, his hands gripping the railing. He had fought hard, and his ship bore the marks of it. Burned plating and cracked shield nodes dotted its surface. Yet the crew stood proud. They had faced the Valari head-on and broken them. Daniel's voice echoed across the deck. "Repair what you can. Rest where you must. But be ready. They will come back, and we will be here when they do." Shuttles moved back and forth between orbit and the planet. Aid teams dropped into ruined cities, bringing food, water, and medical supplies. They guided survivors out of hiding. Children clung to them, their eyes wide and hollow. Mothers carried little ones. Fathers staggered with injuries but still tried to protect their families. Human medics worked fast, wrapping wounds, giving clean water, and calming panic. Some survivors wept in gratitude, touching the uniforms of the rescuers as if they were lifelines. Among the relief teams was Nora Patel. She carried her datapad close, tracking every crate delivered. Her hair was tied back and her hands were dirty, but she smiled at the Telnari children who reached out to her. She handed them water and rations, speaking gently, even though they did not understand her words. Her kindness reached them through tone and gesture. She promised herself that as long as Earth stood, no ally would be left to burn alone. Above, the Valeri wreckage drifted like ghosts. Small drones zipped between the hulks, scanning for survivors or hidden traps. Engineers warned that some Valeri ships might still hold automated weapons. Crews worked carefully, disabling cores and marking debris for destruction. The battlefield was quiet, but tension hummed under the silence. On the horizon's wrath, Laura received a message from Admiral Hayes. His voice came through steady but grave. "Captain Bennett, you have done what was required. You saved our allies and you showed the Valeri what it means to strike at Earth's friends. But I warn you, this is not over. Other fleets will hear of this. Some will fear us, some will hate us, and some will plot against us. Keep your people ready," Laura nodded. "Understood, Admiral. We will hold position until further orders." After the call, she rose and walked the deck. She checked each officer, asked short questions, and listened to answers. Her calm voice kept them steady. When she paused by Maya Brooks at the sensor station, she noticed something unusual. Maya's face was pale, her eyes fixed on the display. "Captain," Maya said, "I think I'm reading a faint signal on the far side of the system. It looks like a jump trace. Faint but fresh." Laura leaned closer. The display showed a ripple in space, a distortion left when ships entered or exited jump. She asked, "Can you track direction?" "Not exactly," Maya said, "but I think it's inbound. Something big." Laura's stomach tightened. The Valeri were not finished. On the Iron Valor, Daniel received the same alert a few minutes later. He called his officers together. "We cannot assume the battle is over. Double the patrols. Keep gunners at their stations. If they return, we meet them head-on again." Repair crews worked faster. Sparks lit the hangars as engineers patched shield arrays. Drones welded plates over damaged hull sections. Pilots ran checks on their craft, ready to launch at a moment's notice. Everyone knew the Valeri would return. The only question was when. On the surface, Nora Patel heard the distant thunder of new launches. She looked at the sky and whispered, "Please, not yet. Let us finish saving these people." But she knew hope was fragile. She pressed her headset. "Captain, civilians are still coming out of hiding. We need more time," Laura answered from orbit, her voice steady. "Do what you can, Nora. We will hold as long as possible." Hours stretched and the signal grew clearer. Maya finally confirmed it. Multiple ships inbound. At least 2 fleets, larger than the first. Laura stood at the center of the bridge, her face calm but her heart steadying for what was to come. "All ships prepare for second contact. Escorts to forward line. Tempest class stand ready." Daniel's voice joined hers across the net. "Valor to all units. This is our ground now. We do not give it up." The stars shifted. Ripples of light tore open as Valerie's ships jumped in. Dozens, then hundreds filled the void. Their fleet was vast, far greater than the one destroyed before. At the center of their formation, massive war barges loomed, each one bristling with weapons. Their message was clear. The Valeri would not retreat in shame. They would come back with overwhelming force. On the planet below, Telnari survivors saw the sky blaze again. Fear swept through them. Some fell to their knees, convinced this was the end. But aid workers raised their hands, telling them to hold on. The humans were still there. The humans would not run. On the horizon's wrath, Laura gave her order. "Target their lead barge. All rails focus. We break their spear." The Tempest-class cannons charged. Energy rippled along the horizon's wrath. The first volley fired, slamming into the Valeri barge. The impact shook it, tearing chunks from its side, but it did not fall. The enemy pressed forward, plasma fire filling the void. Shields flared. Escorts were hit. One small frigate exploded, scattering fragments across the battlefield. Laura clenched her jaw but gave no cry. "Hold the line. Return fire." The Iron Valor surged forward again, just as it had in the first battle. Daniel stood firm at the center. "With me," he shouted. His ship plowed into the thick of the Valari fleet, rail guns blazing, cutting holes through destroyers. Plasma rained against its shields, but the Valor pressed on. Its crew fought with a steady rhythm, their voices calm, their hands sure. They knew fear, but they mastered it. The battle spread across the system. Fighters darted between ships, weaving in deadly patterns. Explosions lit the void. The relief carriers pulled back, shielding civilians as best they could. Aid workers on the surface huddled with survivors in shelters, praying the sky would not fall again. Hours of fighting dragged on. The Horizon's wrath took heavy hits, shields flashing under the storm of fire. Warning lights glowed across the bridge. Officers shouted reports. Laura kept her voice even. "Maintain fire. Focus on the barge. It must fall." Finally, after volley upon volley, the great Valari barge split apart. Its spine cracked and its bulk shattered in a massive explosion. The blast lit the void brighter than a star. Human crews saw it and felt a surge of strength. The Valari fleet wavered. Daniel seized the moment. "Now push them back." The Iron Valor drove forward, its cannons tearing through retreating ships. Escorts pressed with it. The Horizon's wrath followed, striking from the flank. One by one, Valari ships fell, some destroyed, others fleeing into jump space. The tide turned again. When the last enemy ship vanished, silence fell. Debris drifted, fires burned in the void, and the stars shone cold beyond it all. The human fleet stood scarred but unbroken. They had faced a second wave and endured. On the surface, survivors came out once more, staring at the calm sky. Aid workers smiled through exhaustion. Children pointed at the Horizon's wrath and whispered, "The humans held us safe." Laura sat back in her chair, her body heavy with fatigue. She knew this was only a pause. The Valari would not stop. They would come again, stronger. But Earth had proven something no one could deny. Humanity would not bow, and it would not abandon its friends. Daniel stood on the Valor's bridge, the wreckage drifting around him. He breathed deeply, steadying his heart. His crew looked to him, waiting for words. He gave them only the truth. "This is not the end, but today we showed them who we are." In the quiet that followed, the galaxy listened. Earth had unleashed its deadliest warships, and even in the face of overwhelming force, they had stood unbroken. The story of that stand would spread, and nothing in the stars would ever be the same again. The stars above the Telnari world were littered with wreckage. Broken Valari ships drifted in silence, their hulls still glowing with fire. The human fleet held its ground, but the crews knew peace would not last. The Valari had been beaten twice, and that made them more dangerous. They were a race that did not forgive or forget. Every officer on the Horizon's wrath and the Iron Valor knew another storm would come. Captain Laura Bennett walked the length of the Horizon's wrath bridge. She checked the stations, listened to her officers, and gave calm replies. Her voice was steady, her posture strong, even though her body carried exhaustion. She knew her crew looked to her, and she refused to let them see weakness. Outside the viewports, fires still burned on the Telnari world. Her mind kept returning to those survivors, still fragile, still at risk. Commander Daniel Price on the Iron Valor had the same thoughts. His ship bore heavy scars. Sections of armor were scorched, and shield nodes flickered under stress. Yet his crew worked with focus. Engineers welded new plates. Medics treated the injured in makeshift bays. Gunners cleaned barrels and checked rails, their hands black with grease. They moved as if they had forgotten fear, or perhaps as if they refused to let fear stop them. Daniel knew they needed his strength, so he gave it. His voice carried through the decks, calm and firm. "We are still here. We are still ready. If they come, we meet them again." On the surface, aid teams kept pulling survivors from ruins. Nora Patel led her small group through a broken district near the river. Buildings leaned like tired giants, their walls cracked and blackened. She carried a light in one hand and pointed civilians toward the shuttles. Children walked close to her side, clutching ration packs as if they were treasure. She smiled at them, speaking softly even though they did not understand the words. They understood her tone. Her kindness gave them hope. Night fell on the planet, though fires made the sky glow red. Aid camps spread under makeshift domes. Medics stitched wounds and handed out food. The Telnari survivors sat in silence, staring at the humans as if they could not believe rescue was real. Some wept openly. Others sat still, their eyes empty after all they had lost. Nora moved among them, touching shoulders, handing blankets, and promising safety. Her voice was soft, but it carried more strength than steel. Above, the fleet received new reports. Maya Brooks at the Horizon's Wrath sensor station called out, "Captain, I'm detecting distant activity. Not a fleet yet, but relays are alive. Someone is watching us." Laura leaned closer. "Valerie scouts?" Maya nodded. "Likely. They're gathering data on our strength." Laura's jaw tightened. She spoke clearly. "They will not see weakness. They will see readiness." The fleet shifted into defensive formation. Escorts patrolled the edges, scanning for hidden ships. Drones spread outward, searching for mines or traps. The Horizon's Wrath and Iron Valor stood at the core, glowing like watchtowers. The message was clear. Earth was not leaving. Daniel sent a report to Laura. "If they come again in force, this world cannot stand another fight. We will save as many civilians as we can, but we must prepare for the worst." Laura read it, then answered, "We prepare, yes. But we do not run. If we leave now, every ally will think Earth's promise is empty. We hold as long as we can." Hours stretched into days. Small clashes broke out. Valerie raiders tested the human lines, darting in with swift ships. Human escorts met them with precision fire. The Iron Valor intercepted one raid, its guns shredding enemy craft before they could reach the planet. Crews cheered quietly when the last raider burned, but Daniel reminded them, "This is only a shadow of what is coming." Laura called her senior officers together. They gathered around the main table, the holographic map glowing between them. "The Valari will not stop," she said. "They will gather more fleets. They will bring heavier weapons. We must use what time we have to build defenses. We must prepare not just to fight, but to endure." Maya spoke softly. "Captain, there is another risk. If the Valari gather such force, they might not just aim at the Telnari. They might aim at Earth itself." The words settled heavy in the room. No one had spoken it before, but all had thought it. Laura kept her voice even. "Then we will meet them wherever they strike. But for now, this world is our stand." Work began at once. Engineers deployed orbital shields around key relief zones. Shuttles dropped sensor towers across the planet's surface. Defense drones hovered in the skies, ready to intercept strikes. Pilots flew constant patrols, watching for the flash of jump drives. Aid teams dug shelters deeper, guiding civilians underground where plasma fire could not reach. Every hour was spent preparing, because every hour might be the last before another storm. On the Iron Valor, Daniel walked the decks at night. The ship was quiet except for the hum of systems and the clank of repair tools. He stopped by a viewport and looked at the stars. He thought of the weight pressing on his shoulders. He thought of his crew, so young, yet so brave. He thought of the promise they carried, not just to the Telnari, but to every ally who looked to Earth now. He whispered to himself, "We cannot fail. Not here." On the surface, Nora Patel sat beside a Telnari child who had lost her parents. The girl did not speak, but she held Nora's hand tightly. Nora told her stories in simple English, stories of Earth's rivers and mountains, of cities filled with lights. The child listened, not understanding the words but hearing the comfort. Nora smiled even though her own eyes carried tears. She knew this was what made all the battles worth it. The signal of the next attack came at dawn. Maya's voice cut through the Horizon's Wrath bridge. "Captain, multiple jump traces inbound. Large signatures. This is a major fleet." Laura stood tall. She gave her order in a calm, steady tone. "All ships to battle stations. This is the moment we prepared for. We hold this ground." Daniel echoed her words across the Valor. "To your posts. This is what we trained for. We stand together." The stars ripped open. Valerie's ships poured through, wave after wave. Their fleet was vast, larger than any before. Massive dreadnoughts led the charge, their hulls covered in weapons. Carriers released swarms of fighters. Plasma fire lit the void before the ships had even finished their jumps. The human fleet braced, shields flared, rails charged. The third great battle for the Telnari world had begun. The Horizon's Wrath fired first. Its cannons slammed into a Valari dreadnought, tearing chunks from its hull. The Iron Valor surged ahead, guns blazing, scattering fighters with each volley. Escorts weaved between enemy wings, firing with precision. The void turned into chaos. Explosions painted the darkness with fire. On the surface, aid workers herded civilians into shelters. Nora ran with the child clinging to her side. Overhead, the sky burned with streaks of light. The ground shook as Rex fell from orbit. She forced herself not to look up, only forward, guiding as many as she could. In orbit, Laura and Daniel fought with all they had. Their voices carried through the net, calm and sure even as their ships shook. They called targets, shifted formations, and kept their crews steady. The battle raged for hours. Human ships burned. Valari dreadnoughts shattered. The sky became a graveyard of steel and fire. At last, the Valari began to falter. The Horizon's Wrath struck down their command ship with a final barrage. The Iron Valor tore apart their carriers. Without leaders, the enemy line broke. Survivors fled into jump space, leaving behind wreckage and silence. When the firing stopped, the human fleet floated battered but alive. Fires burned across decks. Medics rushed through corridors. Crews slumped in exhaustion. Yet they had held. They had not yielded. The Telnari world still stood. Laura looked out at the drifting wreckage. Her face was calm, but her heart was heavy. She knew more battles would come. But she also knew Earth had proven something that no one could deny. Humanity would fight for its friends, no matter the cost. Daniel leaned against the Valor's railing, sweat on his brow. His crew looked at him with weary eyes. He spoke softly, but his words carried strength. We held. Remember this. We held. On the surface, Nora sat in the shelter beside the child. The girl finally spoke a single word in her own tongue, and Nora understood without translation. Safe. The stars outside shone cold and distant. The war was not over. But Earth had shown its wrath, and the galaxy would never forget it. The silence after the third battle felt heavier than the noise of war. The stars above the Telnari world were filled with wreckage, glowing fragments and drifting hulks of broken ships. Human warships floated among them, battered but alive. The Horizon's Wrath and the Iron Valor stood at the heart of the fleet, their hulls scarred yet still burning with power. Crews slumped at their stations, their bodies weary but their eyes steady. They knew they had faced the worst the Valari had thrown at them and had not broken. On the bridge of the Horizon's Wrath, Captain Laura Bennett sat quietly in her chair. Her eyes lingered on the stars, but her mind was on the people below. Reports scrolled across her screen. Thousands of Telnari civilians saved, thousands more lost. She carried both numbers in her heart. She knew victory never came without cost. She whispered to herself, "We saved who we could. That must be enough." Commander Daniel Price on the Iron Valor leaned over the railing of his bridge. He was pale with exhaustion, but his voice carried calm authority as he gave orders. "Damage control, stay sharp. Medics, rotate your shifts. Gunnery crews, clean barrels and rest your hands. We may need them again." His officers nodded and obeyed. He did not speak of triumph. He spoke of readiness because he knew the Valari were not finished. On the surface of the planet, Nora Patel walked through the shelters. The air smelled of smoke and dust, but the sounds were different now. Instead of cries of terror, there were soft voices, laughter of children and the hum of relief workers. She carried her datapad, checking lists of food, water, and medicine. Every crate mattered. She knelt to speak gently to a group of Telnari children, handing them blankets. Their eyes were wide, but not with fear anymore, with hope. She smiled, and in that moment she felt stronger than any warship. The human fleet held orbit, but across the galaxy, messages spread faster than light. News of the battles reached every corner. Civilizations that had once mocked humanity now whispered with awe. Traders told tales in crowded markets of Earth's warships tearing Valari dreadnoughts apart. Soldiers on distant borders repeated stories of the Horizon's Wrath and the Iron Valor. standing like giants in the void. Some saw Earth as a protector. Others saw Earth as a threat. But none ignored Earth anymore. Admiral Hayes contacted Laura through a secure channel. His voice was heavy but proud. You did what no one expected. You saved an ally against impossible odds. The Valari will think twice before striking so boldly again. But you must be ready, Captain. They will come back. And others will test us. The galaxy has seen our strength, and it will not stay silent. Laura answered simply, We are ready. We will always be ready. That night, if nights could be counted in orbit, Laura walked alone through the quiet corridors of her ship. The hum of systems filled the silence. She stopped at a viewport and looked down at the planet. Fires still glowed, but so did the lights of aid camps. Humanity had left its mark there, not only in battle but in compassion. She thought of the faces of survivors, of Nora carrying children, of Daniel pushing his ship through fire. She knew this was more than war. This was identity. Humanity had declared itself. On the Iron Valor, Daniel sat with his senior officers. They shared a simple meal in the mess, bread and broth heated in metal trays. No one laughed, but no one cried either. They sat together, the weight of battle heavy on them. Daniel spoke softly. We stood when others thought we would fall. Remember this. When fear comes again, remember today. We did not bend. We did not break. His crew listened, and in their tired eyes burned a steady flame. On the surface, Nora helped organize the rebuilding of shelters. She worked beside Telnari survivors, guiding their hands as they raised walls and cleared rubble. She was not a soldier, but her work was just as vital. She told the survivors simple words she hoped they understood. You are not alone. We are here. They answered with nods and tears. For them, Earth had become more than an ally. Earth had become family. Days passed. The human fleet remained in orbit, guarding against more attacks. Scouts returned with reports the Valari had pulled back, licking their wounds. They would return, but not soon. For now, humanity had bought time. Time for the Telnari to rebuild. Time for Earth to prepare. Time for the galaxy to think about what had been revealed. On the horizon's wrath, Laura called a meeting of her senior staff. They stood around the table, the holographic map glowing between them. We held this world, she said, but we must think beyond it. The Valari will strike elsewhere. We must be ready to defend again. We must show the galaxy that our promise is real everywhere, not just here. Maya Brooks spoke, her voice careful but strong. Captain, there will be fear. Some will welcome us, others will resist us. But all will remember. We must be wise in how we move forward. Laura nodded. Yes, his strength without wisdom is just destruction. We are not here to conquer. We are here to protect. That must remain clear. Daniel joined the call from the Valor. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his voice was firm. The Valari thought we were weak. Now they know better. If they come again, we will be ready. If others test us, we will answer. Earth is no longer in the shadows. In the shelters, Nora heard stories whispered among the survivors. They spoke of how the humans had come in their darkest hour. They spoke of the horizon's wrath as if it were a shield from the heavens, of the Iron Valor as if it were a sword forged in stars. She listened and smiled, though she knew the humans were only people tired and scarred. But she also knew the stories mattered. Stories carried hope, and hope gave life. Weeks later, the fleet prepared to depart. The Telnari had begun to rebuild. Their leaders stood in the rubble of their council hall, addressing the survivors with new strength. They thanked humanity not with grand speeches, but with simple words. You stood with us. We will never forget. Shuttles carried aid teams back to orbit. Nora hugged the children she had cared for. The little girl who once clung to her hand now smiled and whispered the word she had learned. Safe. Nora held her close, then let her go. She boarded the shuttle with tears in her eyes, but also pride in her heart. When the last shuttle docked, the fleet shifted into departure formation. Laura stood on the bridge of the horizon's wrath. She looked at the scarred faces of her crew, at the glowing stars beyond the viewport. She spoke into the ship-wide net. We came here to defend friends. We did what we promised. We showed the galaxy who we are. Now we go home, but we will carry this with us always. Daniel gave his own words on the Valor. You fought with courage. You held when others would have fallen. Carry this pride, but carry also humility. We fight not for glory, but for people. Never forget that. The jump gates lit. The fleet vanished from orbit, leaving behind a world scarred but alive. The Telnari watched the stars and whispered thanks into the night. Across the galaxy, the story spread. They destroyed Earth's allies, and Earth answered with wrath. The Volari learned fear. Other empires learned respect. And everywhere people spoke of the day humanity stood tall. In quiet moments afterward, Laura sat at her desk and looked at a photo of Earth. She thought of green fields, oceans, and cities filled with light. She thought of the promise that bound her to those stars, that humanity would not hide, would not bow, and would not abandon. She closed her eyes and whispered, "This is who we are." Daniel walked the Valor's decks, his boots echoing in the silence. He touched the railings, the walls, the scars of battle. He thought of the men and women who had fought and fallen. He thought of the ones who had survived. He promised himself he would never let their sacrifice be forgotten. Nora stood at a viewport on a carrier, looking back at the stars fading into jump. She thought of the children's faces, of the word safe, and she knew her place in the story. She was not a soldier, but she was part of the stand. She was part of what Earth had become. And so the story of the Horizon's wrath and the Iron Valor spread into the galaxy. Not a story of conquest, but of protection. Not a story of fear, but of hope. They destroyed Earth's allies, and Earth answered. The war was not over. It would never be over. But Earth had taken its place among the stars, and nothing would ever be the same again.